Welcome to the 38th episode of the JewishDrink.com podcast and video show. I'm your host, Rabbi Drew Kaplan, and I'm very excited for this episode featuring Neal Cohen, co-founder of Tip Top Proper Cocktails. And I want to give a shout out to my colleague, Rabbi Hillel Nori, for making the connection. And I'm very excited to have Neal Cohen on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Neal,
virtually having me.
That's right. Absolutely. And so Neal, you started up, what is it? Tip Top?
Tip Top Proper Cocktails. We're here in Atlanta, Georgia. Only distributed in Georgia right now, but working on more markets. Yeah, we can get into that.
So only Georgia?
Yeah, just the state of Georgia. I mean, the alcohol world and distribution is quite a labyrinth to navigate. And so we started in Georgia. We're two guys from Georgia that we've been childhood friends, forever and ever. And we were off in New York and other places before we came back here to set up shop. And so right now in Georgia and kind of local here, but branching out sooner than later.
Awesome. All right. So you have three products, right, that are pre-packaged cocktails, and here's the catch: they're all certified kosher, right?
They are. They're all okay kosher. You see awesome. It? See right there.
Nice. So what are the three products you offer?
So we're doing, and you're seeing this backwards, so I'll make sure to read it. A Manhattan. We're doing a Negroni, and then we're doing the Old Fashioned. So this is the trifecta of classic bitter cocktails. These are cocktails that have been in demand for over 100 years, and now making them on demand. And we just really wanted to start with kind of those basics and make them easy and accessible and consistent. And so, very, very classic kind of boozy stirred cocktails. You're talking about a old fashioned that comes in at 74 proof. The Manhattan's up at 62, and the Negroni's up at 52.
Nice.
They're only, they're 3.4 ounces, but I'll demo you this right now, actually, as I prepare to drink my my Manhattan. 3.4 ounces in this tiny can is really the appropriate amount of liquid for your cocktail.
Clever.
That's our Manhattan.
Yeah. So although I definitely want to come back to the kosher aspects for 100% sure, what was the story behind the creation of the company? How did you and your co-founder create it? And how did it come to be?
Before I start talking, L'chaim.
L'chaim. I know. I feel I should grab something.
Oh, good. I should have sent you something, but soon enough. My co-founder and I, Reisman, grew up in Atlanta, as I mentioned, going to Greenfield Hebrew Academy. We were both music buff. We both managed to get in our fair share of trouble. And by the time high school had ended, we had a ton of fish shows under our belt and had been going to concerts week in, week out, 3-4 a week, just real rabid music fans. And when we graduated from high school, we went to go to the Bonnaroo Music Festival. It was the very first year it existed. And while we were there, and being drilled by all our family about what we're going to do with our lives at college, we're like, what we're going to do with our lives. We're going to figure out how to get involved in putting on music festivals. So fast forward, 10 plus years, graduate from college, pursue professions in the music festival industry. We started the Governor's Ball Music Festival up in New York City. I went to work for Superfly, which is the company that founded Bonnaroo, and Outside Lands, and dabbled in a lot of culinary and kind of cocktail events as well. So I was in marketing there, and Yoni was kind of generally a business guy in the industry. And we kind of ran those parallel paths. When it was Yoni's turn to get out of the business, he moved back to Atlanta. He sold Gov to Live Nation and was wondering about what was next. And one of the things that he was doing at Governor's Ball was overseeing the vending program, the concessions. And as the trend of craft cocktails was really catching fire and becoming more mainstream, they needed a way to streamline the process of getting a good cocktail in people's hands at a music festival. So he found that to be really interesting. I was like, dude, we're music festival guys. Like, that's what we do. And I was still in New York and I was still in that world. But over the course of like a year, as he in this underway and doing the research, he kind of pulled me in and grabbed my ear. And I've always had a big fixation on food and the culinary space. And this kind of appealed to me, jumped on board. Tony had been to our childhood friend, David Stein. He also went to Hebrew Academy with us, and he started a very successful brewery here in Georgia called Creature Comforts. Oh, yeah. And they're amazing, really just held in the highest regard in brewing world. And Yoni said, look, I want to do canned cocktails. What do you think? And he said, that sounds interesting. Here's the guy you need to talk to. And David had worked at a place called the Brick Store Pub here in Atlanta, kind of the mecca of the craft beer movement of the Southeast. And had been working with these guys who started a place called the Kimball House. And Miles McQuarrie is the beverage director at Kimball House. They've been nominated, I think, 4 times or 5 times now for Outstanding Bar Program by the James Beard Foundation. And he said, listen, you really got to talk to Miles. Miles, as it turns out, was keen to take on this challenge. And a couple years of product development with him. About halfway through, I came on, and just, what he did essentially was produce the gold standard of what he thought these drinks should be straight off of his bar. And then we consulted with a beverage development company on how to take that gold standard, produce it in a consistent formulaic way so that it could be canned and be shelf stable and distributed, because it's not as simple as just pouring those 3 bottles and mixing it up and canning it. So over the course of 2+ years, we worked at that, worked on all our packaging and canning and branding. And this little guy came off the line in September for the very first time. It's been a whirlwind ever since. Really, there's not a lot of products like this on the market. And what we've seen is people have been kind of, without knowing it, waiting for something like this.
When was it that Yoni started realizing there was this greater demand for cocktails at music events?
Well, especially in New York City, right, where people were 2010 accustomed to go anywhere they go, being able to get a really great cocktail. It still continues to disperse throughout the country, throughout the world, kind of from, New York is one of the main epicenters of that. Probably epicenter is a strange word to use with New York right now, but I'm referring to cocktails. I think it was partially because people like us do this. People that were going to these music festivals also frequented these cocktail bars. And, what if instead of that 8 or 10 or whatever price tag they're putting on a beer at one of these events, what if instead of that, you're able to produce a cocktail which people want and are willing to pay, premium for. So you're always looking for opportunities to increase the revenue at a music festival. What they did initially was they were batching cocktails and putting them in kegs. And for a simple, and that's a fine solution, honestly, for a 3-day event. You don't have to worry about the waste as much, but when it comes down to it, the consistency couldn't be there. when you're doing a batch in a keg. And through his conversations with his concessions people that do festivals all around, they said, you know, the way to really do this is put it in a can, because in a keg, legally you can't distribute it. Legally, you can't distribute a product that's above 1.75 liter of spirits.
Wow.
So, you know, that's a handle essentially. So yeah, you can't do kegs. So this business wouldn't work with kegs. But also, if it's an hour before the end of the night, are they really going to want to crack a keg and potentially deal with all that waste? So then you're missing out on an hour's worth of sales because you don't want to waste an entire keg, which with liquor is pretty high price tag per ounce.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned the three that you've got, the Negroni, the Manhattan, and the...
Yeah.
What was the third one?
Old fashioned.
Old
fashioned.
Right, the old fashioned.
And
So
fashioned is our best seller. I mean, this is this is the leader of the pack. I mean, I'm not saying it's my favorite, because I really do love them all equally. But as far as what people, Old Fashioned is the #1 best-selling drink across the world at craft cocktail bars. You look at the list, forever and ever.
People love their bourbon. It's just sweeter bourbon.
That's right, and it's the first cocktail ever. That's why it's called the Old Fashioned. So, you know, yeah, it's a good one. Bon Appetit magazine actually did an article in November or December that was all about, you know, there's this trend of canned cocktails. And the title was, so are any of these canned cocktails actually any good? And they said, we're going to try every one that we can get our hands on, and we're going to tell you, we're going to save you the trouble, if you can call it that. And so out and tried everything out on the market, and they said the ones that are most successful are the ones that are doing non-carbonated, high booze, high proof, and no juice. And they put our Old Fashioned at the top of their list. And that was, you know, 2-3 months in for us. We just didn't expect to kind of get shot out of a cannon quite like that. But it was pretty nice to see that.
That's really awesome. Do you have many? So clearly there are some competitors in that space for canned cocktails. I'm going to ask you, which is, A, how many of them are there out there? Is there a lot? But also, how many of them are certified kosher?
I can tell you, in this 100 milliliter format, right, we have this 3.4 ounces of high proof cocktail. There's only about 5 in the country that are doing that. And I do not believe that any of them have a hechsher on them.
You're saying 5 total, forgetting kosher, just 5 total.
Correct. 5 total that are doing canned 100 milliliter cocktail.
Oh, wow. When did this start?
When was the first?
Yeah.
There's one called Hochstetter's Slow and Low. It's like an old fashioned called a rock and rye. So it's rye whiskey. It's you know, sugar and bitters and all that kind of stuff. The difference is that they use rock candy as the sugar. That's what makes a rock and rye a rock and rye. So that started, I'd say, is probably about 10 years ago. That's been around for a little while. That's the pioneer of this can. To my knowledge, none of our competitors in this format have a hechsher on them. And there's only 3 or 4 others at all that are doing it. Now, yeah, I guess with the hechsher, I'm not quite sure. Not that many even doing kind of the high proof cocktails like we are.
Yeah, well, that's great. So I want to get into it. Kosher, right?
Yeah.
So was it, especially with the Negroni and Manhattan involved vermouth, right? So that's not easy to come by kosher, at least good kosher, right?
Right. Yeah. And you know, the Negroni and Manhattan that we wanted to create was one that's closer to the flavor profile when it comes to vermouth, to like a Carpano Antica or a Koki, some of the higher and, great vermouths of the world that are available. It was partially, we definitely had a mind to do these kosher. My brother will only drink kosher wine. I don't kind of stand to that, but he does, and others that we know, of course, do. And we always said it would be nice. What we ran into was our co-packing facility where we were packaging. Actually, as it turned out, was OK kosher certified, and they hadn't really run into any issues with vermouth because primarily they package just straight spirits. They package bourbons and vodkas and gins, and they do that all day. Wow. When it came to a product with vermouth, they said, we're going to need to ensure that it's kosher. And to my knowledge, it was probably the first time they ran into that. And so we did have to go back to it, and Kedem is the only kosher vermouth available in the United States. To my knowledge, you might know better, actually. Is that true?
As far as I know, when it comes to vermouth, I like to go to Israel and get my kosher vermouth.
Yeah. And our research, of course, like all the major brands make it kosher in Israel, but there's no importer that's bringing that stateside. So, the answer straightforward to what vermouth we have in there is the Kedem vermouth. And which is, I believe, is the royal wine vermouth.
I'm so thankful that for Kedem that there's a domestically produced kosher certified, both a red, a white vermouth. It's really great. It's not the greatest, which is all the more surprising that you guys are able to make such a great product using Kedem vermouth.
Yeah, and what we've done there, as I was saying, is like in trying to really, with Miles having done his gold standard using a Carpano or I think it was a Koki vermouth, that has a much bigger presence of some of those traditional botanicals and aromatics that would be in a vermouth. The angelica root, a lot of the herbs that are in there. And so what we did was basically do an additional sort of bonding or fortification with those botanicals. So it is that Kedem vermouth, but it's sort of reinforced by some of these flavors that are in a lot of these traditional vermouths that wouldn't be able to be in this product otherwise.
Wow, that's really awesome. And do you have any other products that you want to expand beyond the core three for any coming down the line?
Yeah, for sure. One of the main things that we have in mind is seasonality. I mean, the three drinks that we have, which I've now completed my Manhattan.
Nice.
And we'll move on to my Negroni in my custom tip-top glass.
Nice. You have your own Seder to it. You have your Seder down.
Well, it's worth saying a Shechianu because this is actually the first time I'm drinking a tip-top out of my own tip-top glass.
Wow.
Because we just got these in yesterday, so this is exciting.
That is very exciting.
Yeah. So we're climbing it again. We have seasonality in mind, big time. We've got three really bold and bitters based kind of drinks. We want to expand on that. So it's tricky. One thing that we feel is really important is maintaining the integrity of the product in the can. And that's really hard to do with real juice. Very hard. I like fruit juice, but I tend to like it fresh from a juice bar. I don't drink a lot of Tropicana. I don't drink a lot of from concentrate juices. Requires pasteurization, requires all sorts of other treatments. So anyway, we're really trying to unlock some of the opportunities to use just other ways of accessing some of those more summertime pool drinks.
That'd be a huge home run.
Yeah, but while maintaining this size, right, and this kind of proof. So you're talking about your traditional kind of daiquiris and margaritas and things along those lines. But you know, our own takes on them, of course. Anecdotally, I think it's been really exciting to see the reaction that from you, from others, because this is unique. Have a canned cocktail that's kosher.
Yeah.
You know, and we were at the Atlanta Jewish Life Festival at the Georgia Aquarium a few months ago, and you could see like people walk up and be like, "Okay, but this is kosher." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's okay kosher," and they're like, "Cool," you know, and like it's great for weddings, it's great for big occasions, it's great for, you know, for shul and some l'chaims. Like it really does work out, because traditionally haven't really had that option. You've been, you know, how many times is that like Chivas Regal or, you know, whatever it is like is sitting there and people are kind of giving it a strange look. And you know, here you have a legitimate cocktail that a James Beard Award, you know, finalist has crafted in the can and ready. And one thing, we're South Carolina is a market we've been looking at. It's where we've been doing our canning in Charleston. And I have a friend who's who, as it turns out, I was traveling there in March, and I said, I told my brother that I was going. He said, you know, Ben's putting on a Madis Yahoo concert for Purim there. And so I called him and I said, what's going on with this Madis Yahoo concert at the Music Farm, which is a really, you know, established Charleston music venue. He said, yeah, I've partnered with Chabad of Charleston to put on a Madis Yahoo Purim concert. And, you know, so I ended up donating a bunch of our Tip Top cans to the event. And yeah, it was a nice kind of merging of worlds. Me coming from the music industry, we've got this canned cocktail with the Heckscher on it, and it was kind of wild.
That's really great. Any chance Ohio will be on that distribution list anytime soon?
We've talked about Ohio. There's a couple, like I said, this industry is just kind of riddled with all kinds of just surprises every time you start to open another page. And I believe Ohio is one of those that has some interesting to navigate, but we've actually heard a good amount of interest from Ohio. So it's something we've thought about. And Midwest, certainly, again, like these three drinks are a little bit more of your colder temperature type of, you know, winter warmer type drinks. And getting into the Midwest makes a lot of sense. I went to University of Michigan. My wife's from Chicago, you know, and we know that we need to get up in that direction. So we're moving as fast as we can. And one of the main things we're focused on right now, especially given COVID-19 and everybody staying home, is finding a route to online ordering, which with spirits in particular, wine and beer, you can figure out some ways to navigate a little more easily. With spirits, it's pretty tough, but we believe we're pretty close. So soon enough, you'll be able to order that, you know, that case of Tip Top to your home.
Awesome. That sounds really exciting.
Thank you.
All right. Neal, thank you so much. This was really great to find out about what you're doing with Tip Top and bringing these canned kosher cocktails to consumers, at least so far in Georgia, but hopefully other states in the near future. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great.